Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Meade.
And I'm Christy.
And in this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, well, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose.
Hello, my beautiful friends.
Good morning.
Hi, Hadley. So we are so blessed to have Hadley Sorensen with us. She is a mom of 3 boys, lifelong runner, and a writer. Her debut book just came out. It's called The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, Everything in Moderation and Other BS. I love it so much. Released on May 14th. We're going to talk all about it today. Hadley was an enthusiastic social drinker throughout her life. She always felt like her relationship with alcohol was problematic. It wasn't about how much or how often she drank. It was about how the alcohol made her feel. 2.5 years ago, she woke up with her last hangover, her heart screaming that sobriety was the right choice. She had no idea that a whole new beautiful life was about to unfold. I love it so much. She uses her social media platform to tell her story with the hopes it will reach someone struggling as she was. Her goal is to help others realize that anyone can quit drinking at any time for any reason. No rock bottom required. Welcome, Hadley. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. That was it. We're done. That the intro covers it all, right?
It's a great intro. And I'll just start by saying everybody needs to go follow. If you're an Instagrammer person, go follow Hadley because her feed is so fun and so inspirational. And now you have to remind me what is it Hadley at Hadley Sorensen? Is that your handle?
It's Hadley_Sorensen.
Hadley_Sorensen. Okay. I obviously follow you and I love it. So everyone go follow her. She's inspo. So yeah, take us back. Take us all the way back.
Okay, take you all the way back. So I live in the Washington, D.C. metro area, the suburbs outside of D.C., and I've been here my whole life. I had my first drink and got drunk for the first time at the age of 14. Now, to set this up, like I had a very healthy family life. I was an only child. I had parents who loved me. My dad didn't drink at all. He was completely sober for most of my childhood. It wasn't like this kind of generational trauma that so many of us carry along. Just normal, healthy childhood, nothing exciting. But I was socially awkward. I was really introverted. I mean, what 14-year-old isn't, right? This
Right.
wasn't
Right.
wasn't anything, unique to me. But I drank for that first time and I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This allows me to be the person I think that I am supposed to be. It smooths out all those rough edges. It makes me fun. It makes me, people want to be around me. I can be the life of the party, all those things. So I was hooked. It was in high school. It wasn't drinking all the time. It was when somebody's parents were out of town or there was a party in a field somewhere, right? But I loved it, and I became to associate drinking with how you had a good time. And then I went on to college and fell hard into the college binge drinking culture. Again, nothing about my drinking looked out of the norm, right? With the people
Yeah.
around me. That was how everybody drank. Obviously, it wasn't how everybody drank, but those in my circle, that was what we did. All this time, I always felt like something about my relationship with alcohol was off. It was toxic. It made me feel sort of icky. I was a blackout drinker from the beginning, and that should have raised so many red flags, but I ignored them, right? Like so many of us do, and just kept going because I thought, well, this is what I have to deal with, right? This is just part of the human condition. We have to drink, and so if it makes us feel crummy, we just have to kind of push through that. And after college, I fell right into the mommy wine culture, and I fell into that hard. I was a really cringy example of all that's wrong with mommy wine culture.
I think we all were, babe. I think we all were.
I make myself look at those Facebook memories that pop up so I can be like, oh, okay, I'll use this on my Instagram as an example of, how we can change. but it just, like, it gives me the shivers. I was a after I was in the mortgage industry for a long time. I left my career to stay home with my boys, and I eventually sort of stumbled into this path as a virtual fitness coach. So it was all social media driven. So I was out there on Instagram, I was out there on Facebook, and I built my brand around being this mom of boys who loves to work out, but really loves her wine. You can have it all balance, right? I eat lots of kale, but I drink lots of red wine, and that's balance. I mean, it was so much BS. But through all of that, I never felt good about it. Every drinking episode, even if it was once a month, right, would I would black out and I would be full of so much shame and regret and just all of those miserable next day feelings. Over time, it just compounded, and I really started to see the toll that it was taking on my mental health. It took me a long time to open my eyes enough to make that connection, which
Yeah.
is so silly when I look back, right? That I ignored all the signs for so long, but that's what it does. I mean, that's what alcohol does to us. It's so tricky. There were all of these sort of events that started pointing me in the right direction, right? The first one, I really opened my eyes and thrown a big 80s party. I always talk about it on Instagram for my husband's birthday, big surprise party. And I wasn't going to drink much. I was going to be responsible and this great hostess and all of that. Famous last words. I blacked out, ended up with the worst hangover of my life and spiraled into a depressive episode. And I ended up taking off a couple of months from drinking. And that was the first time I really identified that shame was the emotion I was feeling. And I thought, this isn't right. And maybe something can change, right? It was the first time like the wheels started to turn, but I wasn't ready yet because, after taking a little break, COVID hit. Everything sort of fell apart. My husband was diagnosed with cancer. My grandfather died. My husband was laid off right before he started treatment. It was one thing after the other. And it was like, obviously, I'm going to need to drink to get through this.
Yeah.
So I did. And it still wasn't a lot, but it was more consistent than I had ever been. I was having a glass or two of wine every night while I watched the news and watched the world kind of implode. And it was that attitude. Everybody was like, "Oh, geez, if I were you, I'd be an alcoholic. How are you getting through this?" We had a meal train when he was going through treatment, and everybody was dropping off bottles of wine and all of that. And towards the end of it was the summer of 2021, I felt everything sort of escalating. Every drinking episode was kind of nudging me closer. And I woke up one morning at our lake house with a hangover, and I had been supposed to go for a long run that day. I was training for a race, and I was miserable, and I had the spins and the chills and all of that.
Well,
And I was
well,
just
I
right?
know.
Doesn't like ooh.
So glad we don't have to do that. I'm so glad we never have to feel that way ever again. Yeah.
I traveled last weekend, and my stomach was kind of upset on Tuesday when I got back, and I felt like I was having waves of like PTSD because it felt like a hangover. And I was like,
Yes.
"Ugh, how
Right.
did we do this to ourselves regularly?"
On purpose. Yeah.
So I woke up that morning, it was like 3 AM, and I just sat there in bed, and the only way I can describe it is I was just filled with this, like, full body knowing. It was this head to toe knowing. It was such a God thing, I think, and I was like, "This is it. I am so sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. This is it. I can't why am I doing this to myself and acting like I'm powerless to change it? I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, I can change this." And so that was it. That was the last time I drank, and the benefits, it was hard in the beginning, but the benefits just kept unfolding and unfolding, and the ripple effects kind of reached into every corner of my life. I never would be sitting here as a published author, for sure, talking about the fact that I'm sober. I mean, me 5 years ago even would laugh, laugh, laugh if you told
Yeah.
her this.
Yeah. Yeah. So relate. So relate. How old are your boys now?
I have a 12-year-old who's about to turn 13, a 14-year-old, and then I have a stepson who is 25, off in the world doing his own thing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Because when you said 14 at the beginning, which is like around when we all had our first drink, like I just think of our current kids, right? Like Ella, my daughter's 14. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Like it feels so to me from where I'm sitting, it feels so young. I can't
It
imagine.
is.
But it's when we all started. Yeah.
It's terrifying. For some reason, I feel like everyone I talk to out here says 14. I mean, it's such a common denominator for so many of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So how tell us how you kind of broke the cycle. Like, what did you do from that moment on to kind of seriously start looking at your drinking and figuring out, like, that it was no longer serving you? What did you do?
I always say that I had sort of 3 pillars, right, that kind of helped me in the beginning. And again, I'm not suggesting that my approach is one to be replicated. Like with all of this, I feel like people can take what they want and leave the rest if anything sort of speaks to you. But I'm a big reader and I love information, right? I really like to educate myself. And so the first thing I did was educate myself about alcohol, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea how naive and ignorant I was to so many of the facts and statistics. It was
Yeah.
mind blowing. And
Yeah.
I started with Holly Whitaker's Quit Like a Woman, and then I just fell down this Quitland rabbit hole, and I just
Yeah.
read them all. I devoured them, and that was sort of what ultimately led me to writing my book because I loved all of these books, but I never really saw myself in their story.
Yeah.
And I thought, and as I started sharing little bits and pieces on social media, so many people were saying, "Oh, me too, me too. I looked just like you. You're telling my story." And I was like, "Well, if I don't see my story out there, then I can be the one to tell it." So education, reading, learning, listening to podcasts, that was a huge piece. When I knew the facts, it was hard to imagine going back and
Yeah.
knowingly poisoning myself. Lots of self-care. Lots of self-care, and I don't mean, like, massages and mani-pedis, although, that could have been part of it, but it was for me, self-care meant getting lots of sleep, exercising a lot, carving out lots of alone time because 'cause I'm an introvert, and alone time is sort of how I recharge, figuring out what it was that I need. I say I treated myself with kid gloves for as long as I needed it.
Yeah.
And then the third part was community, and it was kind of finding a community for me. It was on Instagram. It was a sobriety app that I worked with at the time that's no longer around. It was sort of like the Reframe app. It was telling the people in my life, talking about it, telling them what I was doing, even though they didn't totally understand it because nobody believed that I had a problem. Even my husband was kind of like, "What?" Because I hid it so well, the fact that I was struggling. But those were kind of the 3 main things that helped me: self-care, community, and education.
I love that. To you, what was the most surprising fact about, like, alcohol that you're like, I mean, or one of them? Because I think that was something that was so relatable too. It was like, I had no idea. Also, I probably didn't want to see what, alcohol, and so some of the stats for me that alcohol is ethanol, the same thing that goes in our gas tanks. Like, that was just mind blowing to me. Was there one for you that was just like, wow, what have I wow.
Yeah, I think for me, the big one was the cancer risks. Because we had just gone through this experience with my husband having throat cancer, and he's fine now, everything is great, he's cancer-free. But, I mean, that's one of the cancers, right, that can be that alcohol is known to cause, the increased risk of breast cancer, all these things we had just put our kids through cancer treatment during COVID, which was like a special kind of hell, let me tell you, when you
Yeah.
have to be, like, really quarantined and all of that, and I kept thinking, "Why would I do something that is going to increase my cancer risk that much, especially breast cancer?" No, I don't want our family to have to go through this again and to go through it and then think, "Was that because I was drinking?" So that was the biggest one for me, and I think it was kind of situational because of what we had just been through, but, like, the impacts on your brain and your gut, and, I mean, it was just like the information just kinda hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. You know what drives me absolutely crazy is when you come across someone that then says like, "Oh, well, everything gives you cancer." And it's like, "No, no, no, this isn't like an everything gives you cancer kind of thing. This is like it's a class 1 carcinogen with asbestos and tobacco and like."
like formaldehyde
It's
and
formaldehyde and, like but you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
it's lactose just it's really bad, you guys. It's bad.
Or when people are like, "Oh, sugar is just as addictive. It's just as bad for you."
Oh,
I'm like, "Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Sugar isn't destroying families," and, you know.
Yeah, I was standing, I went back I live in London, but I was back home in LA last summer, and I was standing at the bar at our, like, little beach club that we all hang out with, and I was ordering a Dr. Pepper because I was jet lagged and I needed the caffeine, and also I really like Dr. Pepper, and it doesn't taste the same here in the UK, by the way. So having
Oh,
Dr. Pepper, don't judge me. But one of the guests comes up behind me she was, like, having the ordering this massive glass of wine, and it's like a country club pour, right? So they pour it to the very, very top of the glass, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, have you seen the new report that Diet Coke it's a possible carcinogen?" And I'm like, "Uh-huh, I've seen it." I enjoy your whispering angel. I can.
it's
Yeah.
it's just we've been, all of those facts have we've been fleeced for so long. They've been brushed under the rug and nobody knows. Just like I didn't know. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So many people still think that, well, red wine is good for your heart and it's got antioxidants and resveratrol and all of that good stuff. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know. It's actually wild. And when I went for my right when I went to my doctor, I had just turned 40 and I had not been drinking for however long it was at that time. And I was really excited to tell my GP because she's like my age and she's really cute and cool. And I was like, guess what? I've stopped drinking. And she looked at me like, wait, did you have a serious problem? And I'm thinking to myself, like, you are my doctor. Like, you must just give me a high five for the cancer risk situation alone, right? But no, it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think that it's a big issue. Doctors need to change the way they talk about it. And actually, somebody just sent me a DM on recently in Instagram in response to a post I did and said that she's a doctor and that it's such a big issue because, doctors are drinking their way through med school and
Yeah.
all of the stresses just like the rest of us do. So they don't want to talk about gray area drinking and that kind of stuff because
Yeah.
they're in it with the rest of us.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay, so when you were talking about kind of being this health influencer and talking all the time about you can have it all and that you're kale, but you're red wine and all that stuff, which I totally relate to because I did all that the same. But how did it feel then when you stopped drinking and you started to kind of live in a more authentic way and you were able to because that's the thing, right? It's like like preaching that message. I remember I had a client who we've actually had her on on the podcast. She was a yoga instructor, but she was drinking like a bottle of red wine every night. And she just said to me, I'll never forget it. I just feel so inauthentic because I'm like preaching health and wellness, but I'm poisoning myself every night. And so what did that feel like to kind of go through that transformation and start being able to actually, like, talk about wellness in a way from a place of yeah, true wellness?
Wellness. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's such a good question. And I don't think anybody has ever asked me that before. Honestly, I felt like I was living such a lie for so long because self-love and self-care was this big part of my message. And I looked like I had all my ducks in a row. Of course, social media we can tell any story we want. I had it all together and my kids were cute and I baked cupcakes for school and I was healthy and I ran a lot but the self-love stuff was a bunch of baloney because I really didn't like myself much of the time.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
wake up after drinking and I was full of shame and self-loathing. I just felt really out of alignment with my values. And so while I believed what I was talking about in terms of self-care and self-love, I wasn't living it, and so it felt very inauthentic, and I felt kind of like fraud. So when I started to go through this shift, I sort of felt myself kind of pull back from my fitness role because it was kind of confusing, right? I was like, here I've been blasting this message for so long about how you can have it all and I was realizing how wrong I was, right? All of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a poison. It's literally poison. And I've been telling people that they should be able to keep drinking it while they're getting healthy and while they're doing, and I was so conflicted. So I just kind of pulled back and retreated for a while. And I think that was what I needed because I was figuring out sobriety. I was figuring out who I was without alcohol. And so I just sort of got very quiet for a while and retreated inward, but I was doing hard work. I wasn't just avoiding it, but then I started writing because I've always been a writer, so it's kind of how I process what's going on in my head. And so I was writing little bits and journaling, and I started trickling little bits of it out on social media, and it was sort of like I was testing the waters, like, "Hey, I know I've done all of these cringy posts about wine and drinking and how funny it is, but I've started to realize something. Here's how I was really feeling." And I started getting vulnerable and kind of sharing what had been going on under the surface. And it was cathartic. It was really healing. It felt good, even if people weren't seeing it. I had a lot of attrition. Like here, I had been this Instagram fitness page and that talked all about wine. And all of a sudden, I was like, alcohol is really bad for you. There a lot of people were like, whoa, this is not what I you used to do wine workouts on Friday, like, this is not what I signed up for. But it felt like I was being true to me for the first time, and it just felt so good. It felt like it helped me release a lot of the shame that I had been holding on to, and so that's why I'll, like, pull out one of my deepest, darkest, shamiest blackout stories and just blast it on Instagram, and it's like, "Oh, okay, I let it go." And then so many people are like, "The same thing happened to me," or "I relate so much." So it was definitely a process, but I felt like I was finally sort of being the truest version of myself.
Yeah, that's so good, babe. So good.
Responding to the heartfelt requests from you, our wonderful, wonderful listeners, for a deeper sense of community, we are so excited to introduce y'all to the But Jesus Drink Wine community.
Get ready to be part of an exclusive experience where you'll join a sisterhood of kindred spirits on a transformative journey of faith, sobriety, and personal growth.
You'll gain access to our private community, a place where deep connections can flourish among women who share your aspirations of strengthening faith in Christ and breaking free from alcohol.
But wait, there's more. We'll host regular connection calls to facilitate fellowship with like-minded gals, no matter where you stand on your alcohol or faith journey. Whether you're seasoned or just curious, you are very warmly welcomed here.
Prepare to be inspired by guest expert sessions and engaging Q&As that explore the essential topics for your sobriety, faith, and holistic wellness journey.
Don't miss out on securing your spot. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
We can't wait to see your beautiful face in the But Jesus Drank Wine community.
I'm curious about your book and how, I mean, you said the reason why you kind of came to writing this book was you didn't see yourself, you didn't hear yourself in the quit lit books that were already out there. And I love that you say like it's the truth about social drinking. And so like, quotes, everything in moderation and other BS. Like we talk about here, all the stories that kept us stuck. Like we stayed stuck on the drinking cycle because we would tell ourselves things like, well, but Jesus drank wine, so it's okay. And that's just one of a million of
Yeah.
those stories. So I'm curious, kind of what's some of that other BS that you dispel and bring truth to in your book?
Yeah, I mean, some of the other BS is that, okay, there's 2 categories of people, right? You're either an alcoholic or you're normal and you're fine, right? That held me back for so long. The idea that we should be able to moderate an addictive substance, that's obviously a big one, and I struggled with that the most. I felt like as sort of a type A overachiever, like I can figure anything out. I should be able to figure this out. Well, I tried for what, decades and I couldn't. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. Well, everything in moderation is total BS. It applies to like chocolate or potato chips, but it doesn't really apply to an addictive drug. Just like we all always say, like you wouldn't ask a meth addict if they were just still going to do it on special occasions or if they could have just one, right? Even a
Yeah.
smoker, we don't say that too. We cheer them on and champion them for quitting. So it was lots of BS like that. And then all the way down to we need it to have fun.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's how we celebrate. It's how all of those lies, right? It's how we handle stress. It's how we handle parenting. It's how we cope when life gets hard. Just all of those lies, those stories, like you said, that we told ourselves to kind of keep ourselves stuck because we thought, well, this is what it's supposed to be like. Everybody does it. Everybody else seems to be able to handle this fine. I should too.
Yeah. I you said something there that I thought was also so interesting of like when we're like stuck in the drinking cycle and we're trying to figure out like how we can basically outsmart alcohol, right? Like why can't we do this? Like why can't we figure out what the secret code is? And yet when we're like going through that, we're still drinking. And like going on maybe like a dry January or a month off here and there, but like when we were really stuck, we weren't actually like doing the work of all the things that we talk about like you said about reading all the science and the quit lit and actually doing the work of figuring out if you feel better without alcohol, right? We're like, "Why am I stuck? Why can't I overcome this?" But yet we're still drinking. And my goodness, but I was just like, "Wow, that was just so ridiculous." That we all
Yeah,
do
I mean,
that.
I could rationalize anything. I mean, I can
Yeah.
still rationalize anything. I ask my husband when he sees like the Amazon charges come through, right? So I could certainly rationalize all the reasons why I should keep drinking. I just kept asking the question, am I an alcoholic? And checklist says no, so I should be good. So I keep going. And really, the only question I should have been asking was, does drinking feel right to you? Is it
Yeah.
holding you back? Is it serving you anymore? Because it doesn't really feel like it is.
Yeah.
I wasn't asking the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were just saying that, it reminded me of when we had, Kristen, Miss USA on, and she said basically it's not all these other questions, it's what is highest and what is best for you. And when we think of it like that, it's like, oh, maybe drinking a class 1 carcinogen, which is the same thing we fuel our cars with, is not the best thing for us. Yeah. Who knew?
No, I mean, so many of us still don't. So
Yeah.
it just shows how masterful big alcohol is at only showing us the information that, they want us to have.
Yeah. How do you react when you see because there are so many of them out there still, the influencers like you were who they're like working out, but having their wine on Fridays and they're still I mean, and you know how the algorithm is, right? So it doesn't quite understand what we're doing. So often I'll get like people like that and the rage that I feel inside, but I try not to comment or do anything because I don't want to start fights. But how do you feel? What do you do when you see that?
Like you, I don't comment. I don't say anything. I very dramatically roll my eyes and then I save them to a folder on my phone or my Instagram. But I feel very strongly that, like, that shaming
Yeah.
someone for that kind of content is I've had plenty of shame in my life. I don't wanna contribute any more to the world, and the people who are doing that, just like me, don't understand. They don't understand what they're doing, they don't understand the repercussions. I feel like people should be kind of waking up to this. But I live by the rule, I'm not gonna fight with strangers on the internet, and
Yeah.
just like I'm not gonna change anybody's ideas on politics by commenting on their post,
Right.
I'm not gonna change their ideas about alcohol by commenting on their posts. I try to contribute by putting out my content that will hopefully someone will see at the right time, and it might plant a seed, and it might educate them a little bit. But I do find sometimes ways to use those reels or posts, like, anonymously. I hate it when people call others out on Instagram. It just feels really nasty and vindictive. So I don't do that, but sometimes I'll use them anonymously if there's no face and be like, "This is the kind of toxic stuff that I used to put out there, and here's what's wrong with it." People send them to me all the time also. "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, did you see this one?" But I really have to, like, take a deep breath and scroll past because it's so hard not to weigh in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right approach or not, but I feel like I could spend all day arguing on cringy alcohol posts, and that's not the best use of my time.
Right, right. No, I totally agree, totally agree.
Well, and it's like when we were stuck in it, like if someone had, brought it to our attention,
Yeah,
well, I'll just speak for myself. If someone had brought to my attention the double life it seemed I was living, I would have been like, I mean, I wouldn't have heard anything they said because
yeah.
don't respond to that. Uh,
No.
There were a few, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 months ago, I was interviewed by a magazine over here in the UK called Grazia. It's like a women's weekly magazine that, like, I used to love reading, still read it sometimes, but it was one of those things where then they posted the headline on Instagram with, like, 0 context and without the actual article that I had written, right? And it was basically like, should moms actually have the 5 o'clock wine? I don't remember what the headline was, but, like, you guys, I got literally annihilated in the comments about like, "Oh, this woman obviously doesn't have children, and why is this woman against women, and why does she wanna make moms suffer?" I'm like, all these things, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh." But then I thought about it, and I was like, if I would have seen that headline when I was stuck in the drinking cycle, I would have, like, literally been really angry at me too.
Yeah, I would have too. I would have rolled my eyes, haven't said something like, "But it's good for my heart, and
Yeah.
I'm really healthy, so I'm fine."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally, totally. What else should we know about the book?
So my hope with the book is that it can be sort of an entry point into quit lit for people like I was who feel like they maybe don't see themselves in those other stories, right? Someone
Yeah,
who it wasn't about how often I drank. I wasn't a daily drinker. I wasn't drinking in the morning. I wasn't, all I was have a glass of wine at 5 o'clock and then binge sometimes on the weekends, but blackout. I want it to be a permission slip for women who have felt ashamed or struggled with it privately to kind of find a way to talk about it, to speak up, to ask for help, or to admit to themselves that they might need to make a change. I didn't see myself in those amazing but kind of rock bottom stories that took place in so many of the books I read. And
yeah,
so I wanted to share it from the perspective of, a more gray area drinker and to show people that it doesn't matter if you check the boxes, right? It doesn't matter if you pass an online survey about whether you're an alcoholic. All that matters is how drinking makes you feel and what impact you think it's having on your life.
yeah, yeah. I remember that realization. Like, I think it was actually Holly Whitaker's book where it gave me the permission not to kind of like use the label alcoholic or any label at all whatsoever. And I just remember that I sat in bed and I cried because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't actually have to like use any sort of label. My drinking doesn't have to be quote unquote that bad. It also doesn't have to get worse, you know? It can be something that I look at just because I want to. And I love that you use the phrase permission slip because that is exactly what I think any and all women who are in the gray area need. It's just the permission to look at this and like you said in the beginning, take what they want and leave what they don't and just see what's best for them. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the fear of, like you sort of said there, the fear of that stigma and the fear of the labels and the fear of all of that holds so many people back from making a change or realizing that they need to make a change. I know it held me back for so long and I felt the same way. It was like, oh, wait, just because I quit drinking doesn't mean I have to call myself an alcoholic. I don't have to use any label that doesn't feel right to me. I don't have to go to AA. I don't have to, I can, whatever approach works for me, I can take.
Yeah. It's so good because I think about, I mean, y'all, like I prayed for a rock bottom. When I was stuck in the drinking cycle, I thought that was the missing piece to finding freedom. I thought I had to have a rock bottom because I what was out. So what I love about your book and bringing this conversation, expanding this conversation beyond like what we talk about here and bringing in more of the people that really relate to our stories that are so similar here is that like
as long as I thought there were just the two sides of the drinking, my drinking would have to get a lot worse because I didn't look like an alcoholic. I didn't have a rock bottom. It wasn't outwardly affecting my life in any way. And that kept me stuck for so long thinking, well, I need some relief, but I guess I have to just wait for that rock bottom. And y'all, I prayed. I prayed for a rock bottom. I'm like, please God, please let me have that rock bottom so I can go ahead and get to that place where I have some like freedom from my head and this constant
Yeah.
noise that I have. And so I just love the permission that it gives for women to see like you don't have to wait for that rock bottom. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
about
so powerful. And so many people will say to me, well, your rock bottom was just where you decided that you were done. That's fine. You
Mhm.
can talk about rock bottom however you want. If that was my rock bottom, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I felt icky on the inside, but not my husband didn't even have any idea. There were no outward
thing.
consequences. So I could have kept going and it could have gotten a hell of a lot worse if I had let it. And I chose to stop before any of that happened. So that's just what I want to encourage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. So,
What
so
has
good.
I'm curious too from the standpoint because I think our listeners here, I mean, a lot of us are moms with same age children that we have. What has been like the biggest surprise gift for your children or what they've said to you about how different you are now or what you've noticed?
It's been really fun. I feel like the whole process has brought us all closer. Now, they never saw me drunk. They never saw me. It wasn't like this was they knew that I drank wine. They would have written done the preschool art that was like, "My mommy's favorite food is
Yes.
wine," or whatever, but I wasn't drunk in front of them. So it wasn't like my family was begging me to stop and all of that. But it has opened up so many conversations now as I'm about to have 2 teenagers at home, the conversations we have about alcohol, the things they know and understand about alcohol, because I've been very open with them. They're proud of me. They've hyped their book to their teachers. I'm like,
Oh, that's great. I love it.
amazing. Yeah, they're proud of me. They thought, are they going to be embarrassed about what I do on Instagram? Nope. They'll help me film content. I mean, so I'm not fooling myself by saying that they're never going to drink, but if they do, they're going to go into it with eyes very wide open,
Yeah.
more so than mine were. And I know that we'll be able to talk about it really openly.
And that's the counter to the toxic mommy wine culture right there. It's like
Yeah.
more stories,
Agree.
more conversations with our kids about this from lived experience and not the whole like, oh, just do as I say. But like the fact that
Don't drink alcohol is bad, right? 'Cause
yeah,
that's not that effective.
Yeah.
it turns out it's not.
Survey says didn't work real well.
Didn't work that way for me. That's what I got. That's the message I got. And look where I ended up. But
What were a couple of your biggest kind of like fears? Like when you woke up and you had that like knowing sense of like, I really need to like take a look at this and, whatever it was, at least go on a break. What were a couple of your fears? I wanted to ask this question because I feel like when we do talk about this and even in my own personal story, like these fears that I had about what this was gonna look like ended up either being such a massive gift or such a non-issue. And
Yeah.
so in order to kind of encourage the listener, what were some of your fears and then how did that play out?
My biggest fear was that life was gonna be really boring and
Yeah.
my social life was gonna crumble. And it's kind of hilarious now because 1, my friends were mostly very incredibly supportive. Also, I'm an introvert in my mid-40s. It's not like I was hitting the clubs. I always say my life is really kind of peaceful and boring, and it's not because I'm sober, so it can't be exciting. It's because I getting sober allowed me to accept myself as an introvert, and I choose to be boring because I want to be, and I'm not trying to use alcohol to like push through that and do things I don't really want to do. So my social life has not imploded. It is just as I want it to be. And I have so much more fun. It's
Yeah.
absurd to me that I thought I needed alcohol. Everything just feels so much more vibrant and authentic and fulfilling. And it's like, look back to when you were a kid before you started drinking. we don't need it. That's just a bunch of BS we've been sold. I'm more happy, I'm more joyful. I just enjoy life a lot more without it.
Yeah. And even when you said the word boring there, it's like, yeah, maybe people will classify my like life as boring, but actually I think it's just peaceful, right? Like it's
Exactly. It's not boring.
actually
Somebody might look at my
beautiful.
life and think it's
Right.
boring. I
Right.
love every moment of it.
Right. And that's another beautiful part of this journey is like the whole journey to like not we talked about this in a previous recording, like not caring what people think because why? We don't have to do that anymore. It's amazing.
Yeah, that was probably another fear. What are people gonna think? And it turns out they really don't care that much, except for the ones that start immediately telling me how moderately they drink
Yeah.
and all, because they're it's shining a light on their own drinking, but nobody really cares what's in our cup.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the least interesting thing about us.
Yeah, so true. So true, so good. Okay, what is a tiny new action that you can share with our listeners?
Well, I feel like I have to say, go out to Amazon and purchase my book. I would be so honored. I hope that it just, speaks to someone out there and they can relate to it. But it's The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, and it's available in paperback or Kindle on Amazon.
Amazing. And we will put the link in the show notes as well. And then tell everybody again one more time where to find you on Instagram.
I'm at Hadley_Sorensen on Instagram, and that's where I spend most of my time. I have a website also that's hadleysorensen.com, but most of the fun stuff happens on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, you guys, everyone definitely go follow Hadley. She's such a fun follow. And thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, it's so fun to get to talk to you because I feel like I know you just from from the scrolling.
I feel the same way. I was excited to chat in person finally.
Yay. All right, thank you so much, babe. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hello, my beautiful friend. It's Christy here. Just quickly wanted to pop on here and let you know that my book, Love Life Sober, a 40-day alcohol fast, is now available for pre-order. I will stick a link for you in the show notes. But if you want to head to lovelifesober40dayfast.com, you can get it there on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, pretty much everywhere. I've also lined up some really special pre-order goodies for the gals that get the book early, so make sure you pop over there to check them out. I'm really, really thrilled to share this with you, and I cannot wait for you to read it. Thanks. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrinkwine.com, and be sure to follow us over on Instagram, Love Life Sober, and I'm Not Sober, I'm Free.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites, meadehollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe to our pod so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you, and we'll see you next Monday.